All right. Thank you and welcome. So we're here at the World Summit Americas 2021 conference, and you've probably seen an incredible lineup already at the event, and I'm sure this will be one panel that you cannot miss. We're here to talk about hot pick AI disruptors, and hopefully you come out with some, key tips on where is the next big area of AI. Maybe, you can capitalize on some of the trends that are going on in this space from our incredible panel here today. So I'll be your moderator for this session. My name is Ali Madhavji, the managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund, which invests in and venture builds top-tier startups and consults organizations such as the United Nations on emerging technologies. We're also limited partners on Loyal VC and Draper, Goren, Holm, an author on several books, and senior blockchain fellow at INSEAD. More importantly, we have a phenomenal panel here with us today. First off, we have Marie Joller, who is the founder and CEO of Snackable AI, a content discovery engine for the audio-first world. She is known for her ability to translate market insights into product vision and build high-performing teams to deliver against the opportunity. Previously, she built and scaled products at Virgin Mobile and Nokia. Next, we have Gabe Batstone, who is the co-founder and CEO of Contextere. He brings to the company 2 decades of experience in implementing emerging technology into complex regulated environments. This has included industrial innovations in AI, machine learning, IoT, VR, and AR. And Gabe has worked for technology leaders in the aerospace and defense and automotive markets, including Navtech, CAE, and Engrain. Gabe serves on the board of directors of the Canadian American Business Council, promoting continental trade policy. Next, we have Jean-Simon Venne, who is the co-founder and CEO of BrainBox AI. As a technology expert specializing in the fast and efficient migration of technological innovations to commercial applications, Jean-Simon has over 25 years of experience developing and implementing new technology to solve long-standing commercial issues in the fields of telecommunications, biotechnology, and energy efficiency. And last but not least, we have Harish, Doddi, the founder and CEO of Datatron, which is focused on enterprise-grade model governance. He was previously part of Lyft, Snapchat, Twitter, and Oracle. I don't know someone that's been at more high-profile companies. And he also holds a master's in computer science from Stanford. So with that out of the way, thank you so much for making the time for this panel and to share your insights with our audience here today. I want to kick off with about hot pick AI disruptors, but I want to start with the pandemic and get it out of the way. So AI has already been a technology transforming so many industries, but in reality, we're early in terms of this technology revolutionizing our entire global economy. And so with COVID-19 disrupting the way we work, I want to touch on the impact of the pandemic on AI. And let's start with Marie. What changed for AI companies the pandemic?
Thanks, Ali. Great to be here. So Snackable's own perspective of what changed, and the answer is everything changed. So we're in the business of working with audio and video content and deriving insight from that. So when we started the company 3 years ago, we were riding on the incredible podcast growth. But then when the pandemic happened, all of our conversations, personal and professional, moved digital. So we've been interacting the way we do right now, which means that from our perspective, there has been this incredible growth of content and urgency to derive insight from that. So it's really made this very well-timed opportunity for us. Of course, being very cognizant of all the hardships that COVID has caused everybody in the meantime. But I think what's really interesting is with this opening of this new market is that we're shifting to this audio-first internet. So if you look at audio video production and consumption, that's more than doubled from 2019, and that trend has continued to grow for 2021. So essentially what that means is that there was more content that we can possibly imagine that's being created on a daily basis. And, platforms of Clubhouse have seen tremendous growth. Probably none of us could have anticipated that, a year and a half ago. And then finally, I would say, people's daily habits and rhythms have changed. So audio and video has taken just much greater share of our daily lives, but also for enterprises, corporate communications, marketing. So from our perspective, using our tools, being able to get kind of the message in a timely fashion in front of the right audiences in the right channels is really what's driving success. So for us, it's been, from a business perspective, it's been kind of really world shifting and an opportunity for us to help those enterprises derive value from the content investment.
I think that's very insightful, and just seeing, not only Clubhouse, but the podcast trend in general, I think has been exploding over the last couple of years. But with that, I want to go to Gabe, at contextere. Has there been a specific impact you've seen on your company and say maybe the broader industry?
Yeah, obviously we come at this from a different perspective than Marie, but I think two of the things that came up there that I think apply is insights and curation, right, as needs, right? Like people are looking for insights and they're looking for curated content in this wealth of information. But we come at from the industrial world, so we focus on where people put warm hands on cold steel, right? They install, maintain, repair, inspect complex equipment. And that world has dramatically changed. And when you talk about COVID, I usually come at it with, I think there's three huge themes that were already there, but have been accelerated by COVID. And that is accuracy, agility, and proximity, right? Accuracy is you need to get the job done right the first time now because the cost of going to do jobs is so much higher. Agility, you can't send three people to do a job anymore, right? Or they have to be distant. There's complexity with the amount of people. So you need agile employees to be able to do more than one thing. And lastly, proximity is now, a critical factor in determining what you can do. So you can't send someone somewhere and just have them do one thing, right? You need them to take advantage of the fact that you spent the time and effort to get to places in this COVID environment. And so to me, that's that accuracy, that agility, that proximity came to the fore, and that will continue on. And I think for all of us, what happened was pandemic changed the way people see change, right? We all figured out that actually you can completely revisit your business and how you do things in a week, in a month, in a quarter. And so the old idea of, no, we can't do that is kind of moved to the side. So for disruptive innovators, that's a crack in the cultural hole that we can go and try to use to change things for the better.
Absolutely. And I think no one would have predicted that you could, change your business this quickly. But, I think we really saw a true testament with how things evolved over the pandemic. And I want to go over to Jean-Simon. What is a practical example of, AI and technology solving a problem for, say your customer during the pandemic?
I might say that, Ali, starting on the impact on the company itself, because we kind of doubled the number of employees during the pandemic. And we kind of start to realize that what's the difference to have somebody in an apartment in Montreal on a team with somebody else in Montreal being in another apartment? And what about we start to delocalize? And it's exactly what we've done. And so we kind of said, we call it work from anywhere. So we allowed people to go back to their whatever origin country they were coming from, if they were not from Montreal, and going back there and staying there. And what's the difference, right? As long as they could accommodate the time zone. So we quickly ended up with people in Greece, Mexico, Colombia, Kenya, Australia, California, Texas. And they were working the same way than if they were all located in Montreal. And that kind of, at that point, we kind of realized that, okay, so why do we need to hire people in Montreal? I mean, we could hire people from anywhere, and then suddenly resolving a shortage of some of the expertise that we're looking for that we were having a hard time to find in Montreal, saying, I don't care anymore where they are located. If they have the right expertise and they do speak English, let's hire them. So now we're having this company which is completely transformed, and we could never go back the way it was a year ago. So it's kind of, I guess, arising a lot of question for the government about when you want to create jobs in a certain territory. That model is kind of exploding right now. And I don't want to be at the government and having to resolve these issues because we're completely delocalizing the company. So on the customer side, it forced us to do everything remotely, right? So we don't need to go see the customer. On the sales side, it was probably the hardest place to adapt because the salespeople, they really like to go meet and greet and develop the relationship. So now suddenly they were not allowed to do it anymore. But on the technical side, it forced us to build all of these processes where we just ship things by a courier and everything is installed and configured remotely. So we're now onboarding building all over the planet that we never been to. And we're probably never going to go see them in real life. So we have a picture to just figure out about what they look like.
Wow. And Sean, I want to point out for our audience that this is not common, even if you've been, focused on the AI, space for this conference. I mean, a lot of companies are going through a lot of hardship. So doubling, the size of your company through this period, being able to manage teams remote in this way is a major benefit that I think you see to an AI company, which tends to be more remote in nature versus many other sectors, right? But some sectors that AI companies are working with have been hit pretty hard. And maybe another point to that is just this remote working culture, right? And I think companies like GitLab really started this trend of remote work in reality. And we've seen a lot of these practices from leaders such as them start to come into other startups, especially which have been more agile on areas like culture and really taken advantage of this situation. Harish, I want to come to you on I know you're focused on governance, and AI just unlocks so many insights that are hard for humans to retrieve, especially from the large amounts of data. Maybe you can share a little bit about what your company at Datatron is focused on, and maybe some examples of where you guys have been able to drive value through this pandemic for your customer.
Sure. Thanks, Ali. So at Datatron, we actually provide a operations and model governance platform. When large companies, enterprises, they have homegrown AI talent who have been invested in the last few years, and they have built models that are meant for different business. But getting these models and operationalizing it and driving the business value involves a wide variety, and not just the data scientists. That is exactly where we come in, because we bridge the gap between data science organization and the IT organization. And for example, Domino's, for example, for different type of business use cases across their units. And some of the models are like relating to store optimization, relating ETAs and whatnot. These models, the time to market, take these models to market to production environments is very high. And we have accelerated the whole life cycle by automating governance part. And what we think is we have seen a split, like some businesses, they have really soared. Some businesses, they have, it has been the other way. But now things are again coming back. Things are again coming back to normal these days, and we are observing a shift in trends. Particularly, there has been a heavy investment in AI in the last few years across every organization. The questions are coming to the business people: what is the ROI to their business? And that's exactly where a platform like Datatron will play a picture, because legacy-wise, offline type of process, but now businesses are asking questions for the investment that they have done in how are they getting the return on investment?
So I agree. I think this has been a huge topic, looking at ROI on these sorts of emerging technologies, including AI. I mean, one of the things that I know has been in the news cycle, and I don't want to touch on this too much, but I'd be curious on some of your insights, is just around this black box problem with AI, right? It's hard to, really figure out what's going on under the hood. And maybe you can touch on that, in relation to ROI, but even in terms of, say, regulation, where you need to sometimes be able to answer to how the AI made the decisions it was making, how the AI, say, wasn't discriminating or other factors. Is this something that you think about? And I'll leave it open to anyone to jump in.
Yeah, for sure. And I think AI being viewed as a black box, it is like an old story. Now that is no longer the case. People are actually making AI accountable for the models that are getting built. And one of the topics of that we are constantly hearing from customers is, how do we make sure that regulations are properly followed in AI? Just like, for example, if you have a bad news article that says that there was a discrimination on workers, for example, it's going to kill the brand, because of the decisions made by the AI. And that's why you need to have a proper intelligence and proper governance across all your AI models. Because what we are observing is, traditionally, if you have seen companies like Google, Facebook, they leverage a lot of AI by putting ads wherever possible, whatever possible. But enterprise is different. It's heavily. So the way you want to leverage your customers' data and try to increase the business value to many compliance and regulation procedures. And that is exactly where what we are observing is, it's not about just like increasing a business value, but also making sure that your AI is subject to any sort of regulatory compliance. So for example, let's say that you have a managing your store workers, for example. Now, obviously, your models, the priority of the models is really optimized for the profit. How do you manage the workers across the stores? But also, if you are subject to any sort of for example, workers, you're immediately exposed to a big lawsuits, fines, or whatnot. So it is the fine balance that you need to do of leveraging AI, because enterprise AI is very, very different from the way tech companies use AI because of the legacy procedures that have been adapted. You are also subject to rules and restrictions, so that there is a proper checks and balances. People are sharing sensitive information, applications that are getting processed by banks, or your credit cards that get processed by the credit card companies. A lot of information is present. Now, obviously, if you look at an organization, there is so much dependency across models that were making decisions. You may implicitly or explicitly insert bias, for example, into the models. And that will be a huge crushing factor, because let's say that you have increased the profit by $10 million, but you have exposed the organization to have $400 million risk. That's going to kill the vision. And that's exactly the fine balance that you have to provide between leveraging the value, increasing the value of the business through AI, but also restrictions.
Yeah, I would, if I could jump in, Ali.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the industrial world, it's even a little more serious, right? It's not just about complying to regulation, but also being able to explain why decisions were made, right? When you work in mission critical environments, we talk about not killing a brand would be a luxury. We're talking about people's lives, right? When you tell a train to go on one track or go at a certain speed around a curve, and that speed turned out to be the reason that that train derails, right? And lives are lost. You can't just say, well, that's what the ML said. Right, you're right. There needs to be a clear line of accountability of what the steps were to ensure it doesn't happen again. And so I think you have a pretty solemn responsibility to the use of AI when you get into mission critical and industrial environments, because the stake is not just privacy, the stake is not just discrimination, and those are both important issues, but the stake is actually actual lives at risk. And so AI, the nature of its foundation, I think is one of the reasons that it's so critical you get it right, and why we have to be somewhat welcoming of government involvement in our world, right, and of regulation, because that's going to be a necessity for the whole industry to scale, is going to be proper regulation and policy around it. And that can be uncomfortable and that can be slow, but actually I think it's one of the necessities for all of this to work in the long term.
Quick thing on that, and I do want to move on to the next topic shortly, but do you believe that the bar is higher in with an AI sort of machine learning based model versus, say, like a human error sort of model when it's not, say, an AI machine learning based situation?
I'd say it's actually much higher, and illogically so, based on probabilities, right? So humans get it right about 80% of the time, right? Machine learning in most, is comfortably over 90 or 95. But as humans, we're not willing to accept. We accept human error and we consider that part of life, and that's almost the way it is. We aren't willing to accept that of a machine. So the bar is higher. The bar is almost perfection. And so that's unfair, and based on probabilities, that doesn't make sense. The autonomous vehicle industry is a great example. If all the cars were autonomous, we'd save lives for sure, but the lives that were lost wouldn't be explainable, and as humans, we'll never probably accept that.
Stop report, and
I think we can't hear you properly, Marie. At least on my end, we can't hear you properly. It's almost coming out like it's an AI model talking. I think it's still there, but let's move on. So I want to move on to the next area on around sort of areas that AI could disrupt in the business models that would attract funding. And this can be sort of during the pandemic, but even looking post the pandemic and what this will look like. And maybe let's start with Jean-Simon. What are some of those business models that you think could attract funding, or areas that people should be focused on as the next big areas in AI?
Yeah, well, I think we're in clean tech, right? So I would tell you that it's super hot right now, clean tech. And it's interesting because AI has that capability of prediction and multi-objective optimization. Combined together, you're taking any existing business model and you will increase the margin, increasing the value. And if it's applied the right way, you're not only increasing the margin and the value of that business model, but you're also increasing the scaling. And that's basically leading up to a situation where you could help to save the planet while you're making money. So it's all about creating business model with the injection of the technology AI base, which is giving you that scalability and that low cost, increasing the margin, which is becoming a super lucrative business model. And at the same time, it's saving the planet. And I think we could have a huge debate of what the government did over the last 40 years about the planet. I mean, it's a failure, right? They did not save the planet. So now we need to find a way with technology to introduce that technology, create these business models, which is going to make people rich, creating the value, so playing that monopoly game. But at the same time, we're saving the planet while we're making money. And this is how we're going to save it. This is the way forward. And this is the opportunity we have. And we're kind of limited by our capacity to brainstorm and finding these things, right? These fit. So I've been limited by the capacity of the technology all my life. I had some ideas, but I was always told, well, no, the technology cannot do it. Sorry, come again in 20 years. Now we're reaching the point where the technology is giving us so many capability that we're limited by our capacity to brainstorm and finding the fit for it.
No, absolutely. And I think the environment is definitely one that's an interesting area. I guess, Marie, what are some other areas that you think could attract funding, or sort of the next hot areas of AI? Oh, you're on mute. Okay. I guess, Gabe, do you want to go ahead with that question?
So, obviously from a very selfish perspective, I think the use of industrial AI and AI for traditionally underserved populations, right? Like blue collar workers in our case, right? So AI for the people who don't sit at a desk, right? There's close to 3 billion people who work with their hands around the world. And when you spend time with them, as I have kind of from Alabama to Afghanistan, they don't have the technology and the tools available to them that the engineers do, that the scientists do, that the people at headquarters do, right? And I think that's just a lost opportunity. And there's lots of reasons why. We don't have enough time to go through all the reasons why, but I'd say it's an underserved community. To the business model side, to be somewhat confrontational and a little disruptive, as our fine host has asked to be. I think sometimes we obsess over the business model stuff too much. Right? Like at the end of the day, it's got to be about a business problem, right? So what problem are you solving? And the business model is just a way that you carve up the value, right? So whether someone gives me an annual license or a subscription fee, right, or power by the hour, to some extent, there had to be value to carve up before that. And that's just a function of it. So sometimes I think we get those in the wrong order, and we think about business models, and then we try to find problems for them, and find a problem and then figure out the business model.
I have definitely seen that, with my VC hat on. But Marie, do you want to touch on some areas that you're excited about in terms of disruptors and where capital you think is going to be flowing in this space?
Yeah, I think in terms of where we are now, a year after the pandemic, it's the digital transformation that so many companies and so many industries were talking about for decades. It basically happened overnight. So all the processes and areas of business, activities that were done kind of very much on paper, in person, not generating a lot of data, have now been digitized. So from an AI company perspective, this opens opportunity to really use that data to draw predictions, to improve margins, as I think Jean-Simon was saying earlier. So I think all across the board, industries where we didn't think that there would be opportunity to apply AI because we simply didn't have the data, we now do have the data, and that's only growing. So I think that's where I would see actually some really exciting opportunities emerging. It might not be the sexiest, but I think it'll be very timely and very well done.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not actually, I think, the sexiest, solution, but it's really just a solution that solves, I think, a very key and critical problem. I think, as Gabe was alluding to, that I think creates the most value, right? And Harish, I want to go to you before we wrap up on, where you see the, say, single biggest challenge around AI adoption within industries, and maybe the biggest opportunity that you're seeing.
Yeah, sure. I think the way we are looking at challenges is one part of it is, last few years, so much AI investment has really happened across different businesses, but really getting this AI into action and really understanding that, hey, the decisions that are being taken by this AI, is this positively impacting the business, negatively impacting the business, or you really need to understand and operationalize how these AI models are being performing. The second aspect that we see is as these decisions are being taken, as one person said, like there is also this, you need to explain these decisions properly to the management. So there is a production level scrutiny that is happening in terms of the effect of these decisions that might drive the business outcomes, whether it is in a good way or in a bad way. I think accountability is becoming very, very important these days in terms of the AI. So I would say these are the two main things that we are observing. Few years back, like the whole AI is viewed as some sort of rich field, like not many people have access. Only certain people who understand it will understand it. But now businesses are like really democratizing the whole AI component in terms of leveraging the AI, taking the business decision. We have seen in our own customer base where some of the customers, they have like a very, very infancy status of AI when they started with us. But once the management has seen the capabilities, now they are pushing for more and more AI adoption across the board. So that is the observations we have seen.
I think that's very insightful. And, with my VC hat on, we're seeing, a lot of, opportunities, especially where there's a convergence of technology, right? You take AI and machine learning and you're pairing it with, IoT or blockchain or other areas, and you're really seeing a lot of growth unlocked sort of over this next phase. And I think as we saw from this panel, it's across a lot of different industries, right? It's really going to impact and transform a lot of different industries to unlock value. And I think with that, this has been a very insightful discussion. And thank you again from our incredible panel. I can personally say I've learned a lot from your insights, and I'm sure our audience will agree with that. And I'm encouraged by the transformation of AI on so many different industries. Now, there's many other incredible presentations and panels from experts all over the world. So there's no better time to, learn about all of these different areas about how AI is impacting different areas from the comfort of your own home. So be sure to check them out. And thank you again from our incredible panelists for taking the time to share your insights.
Thank you very much.